Welcome, dear wanderer, to the Sleepkeeper's library. I'm the Mythkeeper, guardian of the myths and stories that refuse to be forgotten. In this timeless place between waking and sleeping, three of us tend the endless shelves. The historian preserves the memory of skilled hands and forgotten crafts. His archives holding the voices of those who built our world with patience and care. The wanderer walks through histories that never were, tracing paths time did not take. His collection holding the great what-ifs of possibility. I am the Mythkeeper. In my section of this ancient library, you'll find the myths that shaped civilizations, the legends whispered around fires for thousands of years, the folk tales that reveal what humans feared and hoped for in the darkness. These are the stories that crossed oceans, evolved with time, and somehow, despite everything, survived. Tonight, as October deepens and the veil between seasons grows thin, I've chosen a volume that might be the oldest in my collection. It's a story that every culture tells in its own way. A tale that lives in our bones even now, centuries after most of us left the forest behind. Let me tell you about the thing in the woods. Not a thing, you understand, but the thing, the presence, the fear, the other that humans have imagined lurking among the trees since the first time we looked into the dark forest and wondered what looked back. So settle yourself comfortably. Let the gentle sound of wind through leaves carry you into the deep woods of human imagination, where every culture, every people, every generation has placed something that waits and watches in the shadows. Before we meet the creatures that live in these stories, we must understand why the forest itself became a place of fear. Because it wasn't always. Once the forest was simply home. For most of human history, we lived in or near the woods. We knew them intimately. Which plants could heal, which could kill, where the deer paths ran, when the berries ripened. The forest provided everything: shelter, food, medicine, fuel. It was our oldest companion. But something changed when we began to build permanent settlements, when we started to clear the trees and plant crops in straight rows. Suddenly, the forest became the other place. The wild, uncontrolled realm beyond the boundaries of civilization. It became the place we'd left behind. And like all things we've left behind, it took on a darker aspect in our imagination. The forest, you see, represented everything that civilization was not. It was chaos to our order, darkness to our light, wild growth to our cultivated fields. And in that psychological shift, we began to populate the woods with manifestations of our deepest fears. In medieval Europe, the forest beyond the village walls was genuinely dangerous. Wolves hunted there, real wolves, not metaphorical ones. Outlaws and exiled criminals made their homes among the trees, living outside the law and society's protection. Travelers who strayed from the path could become lost, could die of exposure, could simply disappear. But even more than these real dangers, the forest represented the unknown. It was unmapped, uncontrolled, ungoverned by the rules that kept village life orderly. And humans, when faced with the unknown, have always filled it with stories. There's a fascinating psychological truth here. Our ancestors weren't foolish for fearing the woods. Evolution had given them an excellent reason to be cautious. The things that hidden shadows were often predators. Our brains developed to see patterns, to imagine threats, even when we couldn't quite see them clearly. Better to mistake a shadow for a bear and run than to mistake a bear for a shadow and die. So when early humans looked into the dark forest and thought they saw something watching them, something just beyond the range of firelight, they probably did see something. Or rather, their pattern-seeking brains created something from the shadows and movement and uncertain shapes. And then they told each other stories about what they'd seen. Those stories spread, they evolved, they crossed cultures, and they became the myths we're going to explore tonight. The tales of what lives in the woods, waiting for those who stray from the path. Let me tell you first about the Wild Hunt, perhaps Europe's most widespread and enduring forest legend. On certain nights, particularly around the turning of the seasons, people believed they could hear it. The sound of horses thundering through the sky, hounds baying, horns blowing, and voices crying out in terrible joy. The Wild Hunt appears in Germanic, Norse, Celtic, and Slavic traditions, with slight variations, but a consistent core. A spectral hunting party rides through the night sky or across the forest floor, led by a supernatural figure. In Germanic lands, it might be Odin, the Allfather. In Wales, it was Gwyn ap Nudd, King of the Tylwyth Teg. In England, sometimes it was King Arthur himself, or Herne the Hunter, with a stag's antlers. The hunt swept up those who witnessed it, at least in the stories. To see the Wild Hunt was considered a death omen. To be caught in its path meant you might be carried away with them, forced to ride until dawn or forever, depending on the version. And if you tried to stop them, tried to interfere, that was worse still. But here's what's fascinating. The Wild Hunt wasn't purely malevolent. In many versions, they were simply doing what hunters do, pursuing prey that belonged to their realm. You were only in danger if you happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, or if you broke certain taboos. Stay indoors on Wild Hunt nights. Don't look directly at them. Don't call out or challenge them. Respect the boundaries between the human world and theirs. The hunt often appeared around liminal times. The solstices, Samhain, midwinter. These were times when, in ancient belief, the boundaries between worlds grew thin. The Wild Hunt was one of the things that could cross over, moving between the realm of the dead, or the Fae, and the human world. Some scholars believe the Wild Hunt myth evolved from genuine observations. Winter storms howling through bare trees can sound remarkably like distant horns and voices. Migrating geese in the night sky, their calls echoing down, might have seemed like spectral riders to the superstitious. But the myth clearly taps into something deeper. Our fear of being hunted, of being prey, of something powerful and wild that doesn't follow human rules. In some Germanic traditions, to see the Wild Hunt meant war was coming. They were said to appear before great battles, collecting the souls of those who would soon die. Odin, as leader of the hunt, was gathering his warriors for Valhalla. The hunt was a portent, a warning, a glimpse of fate. And in certain rare versions, the Wild Hunt could be helpful. If you showed them proper respect, if you bowed and averted your eyes as they passed, sometimes they would leave gifts. Game meat appearing at your door, or your own hunt being successful beyond reason. the spirits of the forest, acknowledging those who understood the old ways. The wild hunt represents something essential about forest mythology. The idea that the woods operate under different rules, older rules, and that humans who venture there must respect powers they don't fully understand. It's a reminder that we once knew we weren't the apex predator, that we lived in a world where greater powers could hunt us if we forgot our place. Now let me share a story from across the ocean, from the forests of North America, where the Algonquian peoples told of something far more terrible than spectral hunters. They spoke of the Wendigo, and this, dear listener, is a story with genuine darkness in it. The Wendigo, in traditional Algonquian belief, was a creature born from the worst of human nature. It was said to be what happened when a person, lost in the winter forest, starving and desperate, committed the ultimate taboo: cannibalism. Upon eating human flesh, the person would be transformed, cursed to become a Wendigo, a creature of insatiable hunger, growing larger with each victim it consumed, but never satisfied, never full. The Wendigo was described as impossibly tall, gaunt, with skin stretched tight over bones, sometimes said to be made of ice itself. Its heart was frozen solid. It moved through the forest with unnatural speed, and wherever it went, it brought winter's cruelest cold and the screaming wind. But the Wendigo wasn't just a monster story to frighten children. It served a crucial cultural purpose. In the harsh winters of the northern forests, starvation was a real threat. Hunting parties could be trapped by storms, cut off from their communities for weeks or months. Food supplies could run out. And in those desperate circumstances, the taboo against cannibalism might, horrifically, be the only way to survive. The Wendigo myth was a teaching story, a psychological safeguard. It said, no matter how hungry you become, do not cross this line. Because if you do, you'll lose your humanity entirely. You'll become the thing we fear most, a human who preys on other humans. And once you cross that threshold, there's no coming back. There are documented cases from the 18th and 19th centuries of what was called Wendigo psychosis. Individuals, usually during harsh winters, who became convinced they were transforming into Wendigos. They would refuse to eat, claiming that food tasted like ash, and they would become violently agitated, sometimes attacking others. Whether this was a genuine culture-bound syndrome or a manifestation of severe psychological distress, amplified by cultural belief, it shows how powerful this myth was. What makes the Wendigo particularly horrifying as a forest creature is that it represents the forest's ability to strip away our humanity. In the deep woods, cut off from society, from the rules and structures of civilization, could we maintain our moral core? Or would survival instinct turn us into monsters? The Wendigo asks, what happens when the forest reduces us to pure hunger? It's important to note that in recent decades, the Wendigo has been somewhat appropriated by popular culture, often divorced from its original context and meaning. The respectful way to understand the Wendigo is as a profound moral teaching, a story about the importance of maintaining one's humanity and community bonds, even in the most desperate circumstances. The forest, in this myth, isn't evil. The Wendigo is what we might become if we forget what makes us human. Not all forest dwellers in mythology are purely terrifying. let me introduce you to one of my favorite figures in all of folklore. Baba Yaga, the witch of Slavic tradition who lives deep in the Russian forest, in a house that stands on chicken legs. Baba Yaga is complicated. She's often called a witch, but she's more than that. She's a force of nature, a guardian of thresholds, a teacher who tests those who seek her out. Sometimes she helps, sometimes she devours. The difference depends entirely on whether you approach her with respect and cleverness. Her house is one of folklore's most vivid images. A wooden hut that walks on giant chicken legs, surrounded by a fence of bones topped with glowing skulls. The hut can turn to face you or turn away, and you must know the correct words to make it reveal its door. Inside, Baba Yaga sits at her loom or her mortar and pestle, her legs stretched from one corner to another, her long nose nearly touching the ceiling. When she travels through the forest, she rides in her mortar, using the pestle as a rudder and sweeping away her tracks with a broom made of silver birch. The image is absurd and terrifying at once. This ancient, powerful being moving through the trees in her flying mortar, leaving no trace of her passage. In the tales, heroes and heroines often must seek out Baba Yaga for help or wisdom. She might have the magical object they need, or the knowledge required to complete their quest. But approaching her is dangerous. She might decide to cook and eat them instead. The key is always in how you conduct yourself, showing proper respect, answering her riddles correctly, completing the impossible tasks she sets. Baba Yaga tests those who come to her. She might ask you to clean her house, to separate mixed grains, to fetch water in a sieve. These impossible tasks can only be completed with cleverness, with help from animals you've been kind to, or with magic words you've earned the right to know. She's teaching that wisdom can't be seized by force. It must be earned through wit, courage, and respect. What's fascinating about Baba Yaga is that she represents the forest as a place of transformation. Those who survive their encounter with her come back changed, matured, with new knowledge or power. She's a threshold guardian, the terrifying challenge that must be passed to move from childhood to adulthood, from ignorance to wisdom. The forest in Baba Yaga stories is where you go to become yourself. She's also notably female in a way that's not diminished or domesticated. She's old, powerful, ugly by conventional standards, and she doesn't care what anyone thinks. She answers to no one. In a sense, Baba Yaga represents the wild feminine, untamed, dangerous, but also generous to those who earn her respect. She's the forest as ancient mother, who might nurture you or devour you, depending on whether you deserve her help. Some scholars believe Baba Yaga may have originated from ancient Slavic death goddesses, figures who presided over the transition from life to death, and potentially to rebirth. Her house on chicken legs might represent a death shrine, and the bone fence a boundary between the living world and the realm of the dead. To seek Baba Yaga is to undergo a kind of death and resurrection. You risk everything, but if you survive, you return transformed. Unlike the Wendigo or the Wild Hunt, Baba Yaga isn't about pure fear. She's about the forest as a place of testing and growth. Yes, it's dangerous. Yes, you might die. But that danger is meaningful. It's the risk you take to gain wisdom, power, and maturity. The forest isn't evil in these stories. It's simply operating under different rules. And if you're clever and brave enough to learn those rules, you might leave with more than you came with. As we move deeper into the forest of stories, as the evening grows darker and the shadows longer, let me tell you about the other forest spirits, the quieter ones, the ones that whisper rather than hunt. There's the Leshy of Slavic forests, the forest lord who protects the trees and animals. He can appear as a peasant or grow as tall as the trees themselves. He's not evil, but he's a trickster. He might lead travelers in circles until they're hopelessly lost. Or he might guide them safely home if they show proper respect to his domain. The Japanese forests have their own spirits, the yokai of the deep woods, the kodama, tree spirits that live in ancient trees, their presence marked by echoes when you clap. To harm a tree containing a kodama brings terrible misfortune. The forests of Japan are places of deep respect, where spirits dwell in every ancient tree, every moss-covered stone. And there are gentler stories too, tales of people who learned to live harmoniously with the forest spirits, who left offerings of food and respect, who understood that the woods weren't their enemy, but a different kind of neighbor with different needs and rules. The light fades now to true darkness, but it's the darkness of a peaceful forest night, not the darkness of fear. Just the gentle sounds of trees settling, of nocturnal creatures beginning their evening, of the forest breathing in its ancient rhythm. And somewhere in that darkness, the stories continue, whispered from tree to tree, from root to root, the forest remembering everything that's ever been said about it, all the fears and wonders and wisdom of countless generations. In the deep peace of the forest night, when the stories have been told and the fears have been named, the woods become something else entirely. Not the place of terror from the tales, but simply the place where trees grow, where animals sleep and wake and hunt and live their lives, according to rhythms older than human memory. The Leshy settles into his favorite ancient oak, becoming indistinguishable from the bark itself. He's not hunting tonight, not playing tricks, just existing, as he has for centuries, watching over his domain with neither malice nor particular kindness. Simply present, like the forest itself. In the Japanese woods, a kodama shifts slightly in its tree, and somewhere far away, an echo ripples through the forest, the sound of something ancient acknowledging something new. The trees communicate in ways humans never fully understood, through roots and fungi and chemical signals, a network of awareness that makes the forest not a collection of individuals, but a single, vast organism. Baba Yaga's hut has settled for the night, its chicken legs folded beneath it like a roosting bird. Inside, the ancient witch tends to her endless tasks, grinding herbs, spinning thread, weaving the fates of those who might visit tomorrow or next year or never. She's not particularly concerned with being feared or loved. She simply is, like stone, like water, like the forest itself. The wild hunt has passed over for this night, moved on to other forests, other skies. The spectral riders need their rest too, perhaps, or their purpose has been fulfilled for now. The forest they pass through settles back into its ordinary magic, the slower magic of growth and decay, of seeds germinating and old trees finally releasing their hold on life. in the northern woods where the Wendigo myth was born. The winter forest sleeps under snow that falls so gently it makes almost no sound at all. The cold is not malevolent here, just cold. The wind that howls is just wind. The hunger of winter is natural hunger, the kind that drives animals to their stores, that makes survival a daily challenge, but not a moral test. A fox moves through the underbrush, unconcerned with mythology or symbolism. It's simply hunting, following scent trails, existing in the perfect present tense that animals inhabit. To it, the forest is neither frightening nor safe. It's simply home, every inch of it familiar, every sound catalogued and understood. The trees themselves breathe in their slow way, taking up water through roots that reach deep into the earth, pulling it up through their trunks, releasing it from leaves in a process so gradual it's almost imperceptible. This breathing has continued for centuries, will continue for centuries more, unless fire or saw or storm interrupts it. Mushrooms fruit in the darkness, their mycelia networks connecting tree to tree underground, forming what scientists now call the Wood Wide Web, a communication system that predates humanity by hundreds of millions of years. The forest has always been connected, always been communicating, whispering its own stories in chemical languages we're only beginning to understand. An owl calls, low and resonant, marking its territory, speaking to potential mates or rivals in a language of hoots and silence. To medieval peasants, this call might have been ominous, a death omen. To us now, with more knowledge, it's simply an owl being an owl, hunting mice in the darkness, raising young in tree hollows, living its owl life in the forest that is neither good nor evil, but simply is. The boundary between human imagination and forest reality blurs in the darkness. Perhaps that's what all these myths were really about. Not the actual dangers of the woods, but the challenge of understanding what we cannot fully know. The forest operates on its own terms, follows its own rules, exists whether we understand it or not. And maybe that's why we populated it with spirits and monsters. Not because the forest was trying to hurt us, but because we needed to make sense of something so vast, so old, so indifferent to human concerns. We created stories to bridge the gap between our understanding and the forest's reality. The wind continues its eternal passage through the leaves, the same wind that blew through these trees before humans told any stories at all, the same wind that will blow long after the last story has been forgotten. Some things simply continue, regardless of the narratives we construct around them. In the deepest part of the night, in the deepest part of the forest, there is only peace. Not the peace of safety, but the peace of acceptance. The forest is what it is. The creatures that live here do what they do. The trees grow and die and rot and feed new growth. It's neither hostile nor welcoming. It simply is. And that's enough. As I close this volume and return it to its place among my collection, I find myself wondering what the historian might say about humanity's actual relationship with forests. How we harvested their timber, cleared them for farmland, slowly pushed them back until they became the exception rather than the rule in many parts of the world. He preserves the memory of woodcutters and foresters, people who knew the trees intimately through the work of their hands. And I wonder what the Wanderer has discovered in his alternate timelines. Worlds where humans never feared the forest, where we built our civilizations in harmony with the trees, rather than in opposition to them. Or perhaps worlds where the forest truly was as dangerous as our myths suggested, where the monsters were real and shaped entirely different histories. But here in my collection, I preserve the stories themselves, the myths that reveal what we feared and what we hoped for, what we imagined lurking in the darkness, and what wisdom we thought might be gained from venturing into the unknown. The thing in the woods was never just one thing. It was everything we couldn't understand, everything we had to leave behind to build our civilizations, everything wild and untamed that we both feared and longed for. These stories aren't dead, you know. We still tell them, still make movies and write books about what lurks in the woods. Something in us still responds to the image of the dark forest, still feels that ancient awareness that we are not always the apex predator, that there are places operating under rules we don't fully control. And maybe that's good. Maybe we need to remember that we're part of a larger world, not its masters. If you found peace walking these paths of story with me tonight, I invite you to return again. Each week, I'll open another volume from my collection, share another tale of what humans have believed, feared, and imagined across the centuries. There are so many more stories waiting to be told. But tonight, the wind whispers its final passage through the leaves, and somewhere in the darkness, the forest continues its ancient work of growth and decay, life and death, completely unconcerned with the stories we tell about it. And in that indifference, there is a strange kind of comfort. The forest simply is. The stories are ours to keep. Rest well, dear listener, until we meet again among the myths and legends that refuse to die. The library will be here, and so will I, tending to the stories that shaped us all.